And for more, earlier I spoke with writer and activist Rania Khalek. Here is part of our conversation.
When corporations go abroad and, try and talk about development and wanting to do great things for, people in other countries to help their markets grow and to help, to help their communities prosper, and it usually ends up being the exact opposite. They usually end up destroying their land. They usually end up, if they do end up giving them jobs, it usually ends up being really low-paying jobs. And I mean, just look at Ecuador. You don't really need to look any further than Ecuador, where, Chevron has, like you said, refused to pay for the devastation they left there after poisoning, the rainforest and leaving villagers sick, and dying of cancers and having children born of birth defects. So, this, of course, it's very curious and questionable when any corporation tries to, spend money to sort of give themselves a pretty face abroad. When, there's ways that they can, if they really wanted to show themselves as benevolent entities, there's ways they could do that by repairing the damage they've caused.
It's a good point. On the flip side, you could argue that at least if they're going in and investing, they're doing something for the countries that they're going in and doing all of those things that you mentioned. Are they helping at all?
I mean, when corporations do go abroad and, they enter other countries, it's really just, they really just end up trying to make the market more beneficial to themselves. Mm-hmm. And they really, they end up trying to, force the government to make policies that are beneficial for their bottom line. I mean, that's what corporations really care about, is their bottom line.
I mean, that's what they're driven. I mean, that is how they're set up. They are driven to maximize their profits.
Right.
So what is in it for, in this case, a partnership with, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and a think tank for the U.S. to be involved in this? What drives the United States government to be involved in helping Chevron make business easier in countries like you're saying?
Well, the government's full of people like, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who were formerly, heads of large, massive, corporations. And so, it's sort of that revolving door where they go from private to government to private to government. So, I don't really look at it as a partnership between the two. I would look at it as, they're all the same people at this point. Mm-hmm. So, when the U.S. government is involved in this type of stuff, it's because, there's people who will end up going into those industries afterwards, They're, the people who are involved in government, look at Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, they're like the perfect examples of people who worked for private corporations and then went on to be in the government and now have benefited immensely, in huge gains in wealth from their time in office making policies that were beneficial to the corporations they used to work for.
And there's no doubt that at the end of the day, corporations do have so much power when it comes to the money that they spend, the dollars that they have at their disposal, yet we've seen a lot of the consequences of that when it comes to oil companies like you just mentioned, when it comes to nuclear energy, when a great example would be the near meltdown in Japan. So what is really the cost of the power of corporations and the way that they're set up?
Well, here's the thing, is corporations they're not evil and they're not good. They're amoral entities. They exist for the sole purpose of making a profit. So, I have a hard time believing that they're ever doing anything good just to do something good.
Right.
Because, they're always looking out for their profits. But, I would say that, when they go abroad and do this, they're really just looking to exploit more resources. And the consequences of that are, sicknesses, people, losing their livelihoods. And I mean, it's interesting too, because if you look at what corporations have done in the United States, for these U.S. corporations to go abroad and pretend like they're helping people who are less fortunate is really silly. Mm-hmm. Because, that there's situations, there's people who are less fortunate at home right now.
Well, and that's a great point. I mean, right now we see horrible jobs numbers that come out. We see economists saying that essentially housing is in a double dip. So what are corporations and the government doing in terms of the economic development at home? Are they helping or hurting in their policies right now, do you think? I mean, we see GE paying no corporate tax.
Right. I mean, 2/3 of U.S. corporations pay nothing in federal income taxes. I mean, if you or I were to do that, the government would be after us. So, clearly the people in power in the government right now that are supposedly representing us are representing the interests that got them elected, which is generally these large corporations.
And that was writer and activist Rania Khalek.